I am Hannah Morrell, a 31 years old. I'm a freelance medical illustrator based in Portland, Oregon. I'd been saving for a house for a life I thought I was building. But when my sister used $260,000 of my savings for IVF and named the baby after me, everything unraveled. The last time I checked my savings account, I was humming. Rain slid softly down the windows of my apartment, that sort of steady Portland drizzle that made the world feel like it was whispering. I had a jasmine candle burning, my favorite ceramic mug in hand, and my sketch tablet still glowing beside me from a finished piece, a spinal dissection with cross-sectional layers in watercolor. The client had paid early, a small miracle. I was only days away from closing on the house. A two-bedroom craftsman in the Alberta Arts District. White brick front porch swing skylights. My dream. My life was aligning, finally. After years of couch surfing, freelancing, and eating week-old lentil soup, it was here, stability. I'd worked for it. God, had I worked for it. So when the email from the mortgage office popped up with the subject line, "Transfer delayed, account error," I didn't panic, not right away. I clicked it, scanned, my brow knit. Transfer unable to process, insufficient funds. That couldn't be right. I had over $260,000 in that account. I knew that number better than I knew my own license plate. That account was my lifeline, my house, my future, my proof. I clicked into my banking app. The screen loaded, spun, then settled. Available balance, $1,137.86. My breath caught, the room shrank. That had to be a glitch, a decimal mistake, an app failure. I clicked into transaction history. There it was, like someone had carved a hole through my stomach. Outgoing wire transfer, $260,000 to C. Rowlands Trust, IVF Advanced Services. I just stared at it. The cursor on the screen blinked like it was mocking me, like it knew something I didn't. And then came the flood. Sweat. A slow, aching heartbeat behind my eyes. The sound of my own breath getting louder than the rain outside. C. Rowlands. Caroline. My sister. It had been years since we used that account, a joint savings we opened after her divorce when we'd shared an apartment for 8 months in our 20s. I'd completely forgotten it still existed, but apparently she hadn't. Technically, her name was still on it. But the money was mine, every cent of it, transferred from clients, deposited manually, grown carefully. I hadn't touched that account without cross-checking it twice since I was 24. I fumbled for my phone. Called her. No answer. Again. Voicemail. I texted. Call me now. 2 hours passed, my thoughts turned dark. I toggled between disbelief and rage, packing, whispering curses, heart pounding. When she finally called back at 2:11 a.m., I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, still staring at the blinking account screen like I could will the money back. Her voice was groggy. Hannah, what's wrong? You emptied my savings. Silence. You used my account, $260,000. What the hell did you do? She inhaled sharp and fast. I was going to tell you. My heart cracked open like a splintering windshield. Tell me what that you stole from me. It wasn't stealing. Her voice trembled. I panicked. The clinic wouldn't wait. We had 5 embryos and they were going to expire. You don't get to do this, I snapped. You don't get to play desperate and call it love. I was desperate, we couldn't afford it, and I knew you'd say no if I asked. You're goddamn right, I would have said no. Caroline, that money was my life, my house, my stability. She sobbed. It worked, Hannah, I'm pregnant. The world stopped. I found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you in person. I know it's not right, I know, but I thought maybe. I hung up. I physically could not listen to another second. My lungs wouldn't fill. I sat on the floor in silence so deep, I could hear the hum of my refrigerator. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed, a text. Please don't hate me, I was terrified it would be our last chance. Then came the photo. A blurry, grainy ultrasound. Captioned, due in August, I'm naming her Hannah. My stomach turned, I dropped the phone. Named her what? I pressed my palms to my eyes so hard I saw stars. She's stolen my money and now my name. What was I to her? A symbol of luck, a donor, a ghost. I curled into a ball on the cold hardwood floor, nausea rising. She didn't just take my future. She renamed it. She rebirthed it into something I had no say in. No voice. No protection. A child would walk around carrying my name, the name I built with sweat and strain and silence. And one day she might be told some sweet, saccharine story about a loving aunt who helped make it all possible. That wasn't the story. That would never be the story. I stayed there on the floor until the sky turned gray and birds started chirping. And even then, I didn't move. Because something inside me had been emptied out with that wire transfer. And I didn't yet know if I'd ever get it back. The family facade. By morning, the nausea hadn't lifted. I hadn't slept. My body felt like it was running on static. Even the Portland light, usually soft and forgiving, felt hostile filtering through the blinds. It touched the empty tea mug, the glowing bank app still open on my laptop, and the crumpled tissue I'd held all night like a rope. I showered without thinking, pulled on jeans, a sweatshirt, no makeup, no earrings, just my keys, my phone, and a duffel bag with an extra shirt. I got in the car and started driving south. I didn't text, I didn't call, I just drove. 3 hours later, I was standing on my mother's porch in Eugene, the same porch where I once painted flower pots as a teenager and smoked my first stolen cigarette. Mom opened the door still in her robe, her short hair flat against one side of her face. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Hannah, what's going on?" "I need to talk," I said, voice brittle, "alone." She stepped aside instantly. I walked into the kitchen and sat at the old wood table, the one with the scratch from Dad's belt buckle when he used to lean over to cut his toast. The varnish had faded, but I could still trace my childhood initials where I once carved them during a tantrum. Mom sat across from me, no questions yet, just waiting. "She stole my savings," I said. Her brow furrowed. "What?" "Caroline's. She used our joint account, the one we opened 5 years ago, remember?" Mom nodded slowly, unsure where I was going. "She transferred $260,000 to pay for IVF. Without telling me, she emptied the whole thing." Mom froze. I thought she had a sponsor, that's what she told me, someone who wanted to help her. "She lied," I said. "I was the sponsor without my consent." Her face drained of color. "She used my name to unlock the account," I continued. "Technically, it wasn't illegal, she's still listed, but morally, she stole from me." Mom stood, turned her back to me, gripping the edge of the sink. "She told me," she made it sound like a miracle, like someone had stepped in to help after the 5th round failed. "She said it was now or never." My hands curled into fists. Well, it was never her money. The silence swelled like a wave, then Mom turned, her expression stricken. "What do you want to do?" I shook my head. "I don't know, I don't even know how to exist with this. It's not just money, it's everything. It's my house, my future, my name." Mom came over and sat beside me, placing a hand on mine. Her fingers were cold. "She named the baby after me," I whispered. "She sent me the ultrasound photo. She's calling her Hannah." Mom gasped. "Like it's a tribute, like the theft can be rewritten as generosity." Tears welled in her eyes. "Sweetheart." "I'm not a legacy," I said. "I'm not a ribbon you tie around a lie." That afternoon, I walked through our old neighborhood, trying to breathe. I passed Mrs. Caulfield's house where Caroline and I once sold lemonade. I passed the oak tree where she broke her wrist climbing in 5th grade. Every street was a breadcrumb leading back to us. The version of us before all this. At the park, I sat on the swings. My sneakers dragged trails into the sand like I used to do at 12. I pulled out my sketchbook. Without meaning to, my pencil moved. A baby began to take form on the page. Soft cheeks, closed eyes, a curl of hair across the forehead. The baby didn't look like me, or Caroline, just a baby. I stared at her, then ripped the page out. I couldn't bear the weight of it. Back at Mom's, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel before I saw the car. I didn't need to look, I knew. "Caroline." She got out slowly, her figure more fragile than I remembered. She walked up the path, belly small but present, protection already in her posture. She stopped 5 feet from me. "Hi," she said. I didn't move. "How dare you?" "I know." You took everything. I know, she repeated, her voice cracked. I know I should have asked, I was just so afraid. Of what? That I'd say no. She looked at the ground. Yes, and that if I did ask and you said no, I'd hate you, and I didn't want to hate you. My chest flared, so you chose to make me hate you instead. She was crying now openly. I thought if it worked, if I could carry her, maybe I could explain it later. Maybe you'd understand once she was here. You stole my money, Caroline, and then you named the baby after me like that was some kind of absolution. I didn't mean it that way, she said. I don't know, I thought it would honor you. Honor me? My voice broke. You used me, you didn't even ask. She sank onto the porch steps, burying her face in her hands. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I stared at her for a long time. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, I said. I don't know if I want to. She looked up, face blotchy. I'll wait, even if it takes a lifetime. I walked inside without answering. That night in the room I grew up in, under the ceiling still dotted with faded glow-in-the-dark stars, I lay awake, listening to the old house creak and settle around me. And all I could think was, what kind of woman would this baby grow up to be? And would she ever know what her name had once cost? The inheritance letter. When I returned to Portland, the city didn't feel like mine anymore. The streets were the same, sure, the bike lanes, the corner bar with the chalkboard beer list, the cafe that served cardamom buns on Thursdays, but something inside me had shifted, tilted. Everything felt dimmer. I didn't sketch, I didn't return client emails. I let deadlines die on my desk like houseplants no one watered. The apartment felt like a shell I was haunting, blinds closed, the air stale with burnt-out candles and silence. Then on a Tuesday morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address, but the handwriting small, meticulous, I'd know anywhere. Thomas Keeley. My father's lawyer. My heart kicked. Inside was a brief letter on thick paper with the law firm's letterhead. Dear Ms. Morrell. Enclosed is a private letter prepared by your father, William Morrell, prior to his passing. Per his request, it was to be delivered upon your 31st birthday. Apologies for the delay. Kindly. D. Keeley. I stood in my kitchen holding the envelope like it might disintegrate. I hadn't thought of that letter in years. Dad mentioned it once during one of our last conversations when he still had the strength to talk without painkillers slurring his words. For later, he'd said, for when you'll need it. I sat on the floor, same spot where I'd collapsed the night Caroline told me the baby's name, and tore it open. The paper was slightly yellowed. His handwriting was uneven but familiar, curling slightly at the ends like he'd always written his thoughts in a whisper. My Hannah, if you're reading this, you made it to 31, I can't believe it. You were just 20 the last time I remember seeing you asleep on the couch with pens all over your lap. You've always been my deliberate child. Not slow, not hesitant, just thoughtful. Exacting, you work hard, you disappear into your projects, you don't complain even when you should. I saw how you helped your sister, I saw what it cost you. I never said it out loud, maybe I should have, but you carried more than your share. I couldn't fix everything before I left, but I wanted to leave you something just yours. Go to the safety deposit box on 5th and Grant. Your name's on it, the key's in this envelope. There's a cashier's check inside. $100,000. I wish it were more. It's not to buy your forgiveness for any silence or mistakes. It's just to say I saw you. You deserve to be chosen. Happy birthday. Dad. I wept hard into my knees. Not just because of the money, but because of the sentence. You deserve to be chosen. I hadn't realized how deeply I'd internalized the opposite. That Caroline was the one people worried about. The one forgiven, and I was the one expected to be fine, always fine. I drove to the bank that afternoon. I handed over the letter, the key. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a sterile vault room with a small gray box on the table. Inside, a cashier's check, exactly what he'd said. $100,000, signed 2 months before he died. I folded it carefully like it was alive and placed it into my wallet. I didn't feel fixed, but I felt seen. When I got home, I lit the same jasmine candle I'd lit the night my world cracked open. And I opened my sketchbook. Not to draw a uterus or a heart valve or a client's appendix. I drew hands. My father specifically. Big knuckles, always warm, always certain. He used to trace my forehead with one finger when I was sick. That's what I drew first. Then I drew Caroline, small and shaking, the way I imagined they looked when she filled out that transfer form. And finally I drew mine. Palms up, empty, waiting. I turned the page. I drew a baby. Not the one from the ultrasound. One from my imagination. A little girl sitting in the middle of a page of names. She wasn't holding either of ours. She was looking up at the sky, like she was waiting to name herself. The baby shower. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later. It was cream-colored, thick cardstock, hand-addressed in deep indigo ink. The kind of envelope people use when they want something to feel thoughtful, curated, sincere. Inside, embossed flowers framed the text. You're invited to a celebration of new life. Honoring baby Hannah. Hosted with love, hope, and joy. There was no RSVP deadline, no formal signature, but the return address on the back made it clear it came from Caroline. I set it down on the kitchen table and stared at it for the better part of an hour. It sat there like a dare, like a wound wearing pearls. The audacity, the sheer audacity of it. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, not since she'd cried on the porch like a character from a soap opera. Not since I'd left her holding her apology like a rusted key to a door I wasn't sure I ever wanted to open again. But still she invited me. Not to atone, not to repair. To celebrate. I couldn't stop thinking about that word. Celebrate. As if I was supposed to wrap my arms around her belly and coo over the miracle that was forged with my money and stitched with my silence. As if she hadn't ripped out part of my future and repackaged it in bows and onesies. A week passed, then another. And then one evening, I found myself standing in front of my closet staring at a slate blue dress I hadn't worn in years. It had once belonged to my grandmother, soft, long-sleeved, slightly cinched at the waist. The kind of dress you wore to funerals or rebirths. I pulled it out. I didn't know why I decided to go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was masochism. Or maybe, just maybe, I needed to see it all for myself. See the child who bore my name. See the people smiling and sipping lemonade, blissfully unaware that their celebration was built on a theft. See what it looked like when someone used your soul as scaffolding for their joy. Layla answered the door, cheeks pink with excitement. Hannah, she said, voice high and nervous, you came. I nodded, where is she? Layla gestured toward the back patio, everyone's outside. The house smelled like lemon cake and baby lotion. Soft music played from a Bluetooth speaker on the bookshelf. Everything looked like it had been copied from a Pinterest board, rose gold balloons, diaper-shaped cookies, a hand-lettered chalkboard that read, "Welcome, baby Hannah." It hit me in the throat. She was already here, in name and presence and decoration. I walked out to the backyard where a cluster of women were gathered beneath string lights. Caroline stood at the center, her bump more visible now, her dress the color of fresh cotton. She looked up and saw me. And for a moment, the entire party seemed to freeze. Her eyes filled not with tears but with shock, gratitude, maybe guilt. She made her way toward me, slow, careful. Hi, she said, voice soft, fragile. Hi. I didn't think you'd come. I didn't either. We stood there, two sisters, one pregnant with more than just a child, the air between us thick with history. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. Don't thank me, don't apologize, just don't lie today, not to me, not to anyone. She nodded, okay. She led me inside, away from the crowd. To the guest bedroom, where the gifts were stacked, blankets, bottles, books. And there on the bed sat a small box. Inside, folded tissue paper cradled a framed note. I picked it up, read it. Name for the strongest woman I know. For the sister who taught me how to keep going even when the road disappeared. For the one I hurt. This name is a promise. She will know. All of it. My chest tightened. Caroline stood quietly behind me. She didn't say a word. I set the frame down, turned to face her. If you rewrite the truth, I said, if you paint me into some generous fairy godmother in this story, I will never speak to you again. She nodded. She'll know, I promise. Back outside, someone handed me a cupcake, vanilla with raspberry frosting and a tiny sugar H on top. I stared at it for a long time. Then I bit into it. Sweet. Sour. I didn't join the group games, didn't pose for photos, but I stayed. I watched Caroline unwrap baby blankets with shaky hands, watched her husband hover nearby, smiling with a kind of nervous reverence, watched people toast a child who hadn't even taken her first breath. I sat at the edge of it all. Not inside, but not entirely outside either. Somewhere in between. And as the sun dipped low behind the neighbor's fence, casting long shadows across the rose gold streamers, I wondered what it would be like to hold a baby with my name. Not as a symbol, not as a mistake, but simply as herself. The therapist's room. I walked out of that baby shower with the sugar still on my tongue and the weight of 1,000 unsaid things pressing into my chest. The next morning, I opened my laptop and Googled therapist in Portland for betrayal trauma. I don't know what I expected. A dozen names, maybe one or two faces that looked trustworthy. Instead, the screen flooded with options and I felt paralyzed all over again. But then one name stood out. Talia Carver, LCSW. The site was simple, no frills. Just a line that stopped me. Sometimes the deepest grief is not the loss of a person, but the rewriting of a relationship. I booked the appointment. Talia's office was tucked inside an old Craftsman near Laurelhurst Park. The outside was quiet, unassuming, just a small wood sign on the porch that read "Room for the Unsaid." Inside, amber light, clean white walls, soft pillows that didn't scream therapy but whispered safety. The scent of eucalyptus drifted faintly from a diffuser. A box of tissues sat on the windowsill next to a ficus plant that seemed too alive to be real. She wore black-rimmed glasses, a gray sweater, and eyes that didn't flinch when I said, "My sister stole $250,000 from me for IVF, and then named the baby after me." There was a pause, just enough silence to hear the shame in my own voice. Talia didn't blink. "What name did she give the child?" "Hannah," I said. She nodded. "Yours?" "Mine." She wrote something in her notebook, then asked, "How did it feel to hear it?" I let out a laugh, sharp and bitter, like I'd been erased or consumed, like my identity had been swallowed and repurposed without consent. "That sounds like grief," she said, "not anger." I looked at her, caught off guard. And for the first time in weeks, I felt it in my body. Not just rage, but grief. Sharp, cold, familiar. The kind that makes your limbs heavy, the kind you carry like luggage you forgot how to put down. "I thought I built a life," I whispered. "Something solid, something just mine, and now I feel like a character in someone else's fairy tale. The kind of fairy tale where the fairy godmother gets robbed and then handed a cupcake." Talia smiled, not condescending but knowing. "Have you ever said all of this to her?" "No," I said, "because I don't want her to think I'm jealous or fragile or—" I paused. "Because I don't want her to use my pain as another story she tells herself." She set her notebook down. "Let's try something," she said. "Close your eyes, picture the child, picture her at 5, then 10, 15. She's asking where her name came from. What do you want her to know?" I resisted, then slowly I closed my eyes. "I want her to know I didn't give it freely," I said, "but I want her to know I didn't hate her for it either." The words surprised me. They rose up unformed, raw. "She's not responsible," I continued, "for how her name was taken." "And what about your sister?" Talia asked gently. I opened my eyes. "She is." Week after week I returned. We dug deeper into childhood patterns, into the way I had always been the anchor while Caroline spun like a storm, into the years I spent smoothing things over, shrinking to accommodate her chaos. "You were cast as the one who holds the family together," Talia said, "but who held you?" "No one." That was the answer. No one had ever really held me. Until that moment in her office, where silence was allowed to sit like a guest at the table. One afternoon, I told her about the trust. How she used the money, and then put it back in the baby's name. Talia raised an eyebrow. How did that feel? Confusing, I admitted, like an attempt at justice, but also like another way of trying to narrate control. She still gets to decide how the story is told. And do you believe her intention matters? I paused. I think her intention doesn't undo the harm, but it shapes the future. Talia nodded. That's a nuanced place to live. Not many people can stay there. It doesn't feel brave, I said. It feels honest. I began sketching again, not just for work but for myself. Drawings of sisters not touching, of bobbies holding keys, of women standing beside versions of themselves, older, younger, sadder. One day I sketched a girl standing at a mirror. The reflection wore my face, but the girl herself was new, not the baby, not Caroline, not me. Something in between. And in the corner, in faint pencil, I wrote, "She will name herself." Talia looked at that drawing the next week. She smiled and asked me a question that would echo for months. When the name no longer hurts, what will it mean then? I didn't have the answer. But for the first time, I wanted to find out. The birth, I found out through Instagram. No call. No text. No warning. Just a photo posted at 6:03 a.m. A sepia-filtered shot of Caroline in a hospital bed, hair damp with sweat, smiling with the kind of exhaustion that can only come from birth. Cradled in her arms was a tiny pink burrito, eyes closed, fists balled near her cheeks. The caption read, "She's here. Hannah Elise Rowlands. 7 pounds 2 oz of absolute light." I was still in bed when I saw it. The rain outside had paused and everything felt suspended, like the city itself was holding its breath. I stared at the post, heart drumming in my ears. There it was. Her full name. In public. Permanent. The likes started trickling in. So beautiful. That name stunning. Congrats, Mama. Friends, family, some who knew. Some who didn't. Someone even tagged me in a comment. At Hannah M, she's your little namesake. I turned my phone over, face down, chest heaving. No one had prepared me for this feeling. I thought I'd be furious or numb. But instead, I felt invisible. The name, my name, floated out into the world without me, like a boat shoved from the dock before I'd even boarded. By noon, Caroline had texted. "She's healthy, resting. I didn't want to intrude, but I wanted you to know she's here." I stared at the message, typed, deleted. Typed again. I saw congratulations. I hit send before I could soften it or add a heart or exclamation point. There was no emotion left to dress it up. 10 minutes later, she replied, "Would you like to meet her?" I didn't respond. Not that day. Instead, I showered, got dressed, and sat by my window with a cup of tea growing cold in my hand. I opened my sketchpad and began to draw her. Not from the photo, from imagination. The shape of her nose, the swell of her cheeks, the suggestion of Caroline's chin, maybe my eyes. I drew her swaddled in light, surrounded by hands that reached but didn't touch. I drew myself in the corner. Small, watching. The next morning, I called Caroline. "I'll come today," I said, "just me, no photos, no expectations." "Of course," she said, "I'm here." The hospital was quieter than I expected. Second floor, room 218, the door was slightly ajar. Caroline was sitting in bed, hair tied up, eyes rimmed with fatigue. She looked up and smiled when I entered, the kind of smile that asked for permission without words. No one else was there. She held a bundle of pale pink fleece. "She's just been fed," she said. "She's calm." And without preamble, she stood and placed the baby in my arms. I stiffened, unprepared for the weight. She was warm, heavier than I expected, but fragile. She made a soft gurgling sound, her lips pursing slightly. A smell, something between skin and milk and laundry, rose from her blanket. Her face was perfect. And completely foreign. I stared down at her, this little human who carried the name I once thought defined me. She had no idea who I was, no idea what her name cost. No idea how many nights I'd laid awake asking what it meant to share my identity with someone I didn't choose. And yet she was beautiful. Not in the way people say about all Bobbies. In a quiet, solemn way. Like something unfinished. Unwritten. "Hi," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. She didn't cry, just nestled deeper into the crook of my elbow like I was home. I sat in the chair by the window. Caroline said nothing. She didn't cry, didn't apologize, didn't try to fill the silence. She just watched. And for once, it didn't feel like she was performing. We stayed like that for 17 minutes. 17 minutes of breath and stillness and something like reverence. When Caroline took her back, I stood. "I'm glad she's healthy," I said. "Thank you for coming," she replied, her voice cracked. I nodded, stepped out into the hallway. I walked to the car in a daze, the hospital air thick with antiseptic and newborn cries. Once inside, I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. And then, without warning, I began to cry. Not the kind of tears that choke. The kind that release. Slow, quiet cleansing. Not because I forgave. Not because I was healed. But because for the first time, I believed the baby was hers. Not a vessel. Not a monument. Not a mistake. Just Hannah. Hers. And somehow. Mine too. The name in the room. After the hospital visit, I expected to feel lighter. I didn't. I went home, shut the door behind me, and sat on the floor with my back against it like I needed to physically hold the moment in place. I stared into my apartment, the same space I'd lived in for 5 years, and it looked different. Smaller, too quiet, like something essential had been left behind in that hospital room. Maybe I'd left it in her arms. I didn't sketch for days. Didn't answer emails, didn't respond to texts, not even my mother, who sent a cautious "How are you feeling?" with a sunflower emoji like that might soften the edges. I wasn't angry anymore. I was untethered. That baby, she didn't look like me, she didn't feel like me, but still, the moment she curled into my arms, something in me shifted. Not love, not yet. But gravity. Like she had a pull. Like I wasn't allowed to float too far away from her, even if I tried. The day Caroline's birth announcement arrived in the mail, I let it sit unopened on the counter for 2 days. It was pale lavender with silver lettering, minimalist, expensive. When I finally opened it, my name was printed across the top. Not as sender. As subject. Introducing. Hannah Elise Rowlands. Born August 17th. 7 pounds 2 oz 20 inches long. Daughter of Caroline and Dan Rowlands. Named for strength. Named for grace. Named for the woman who helped bring her here. There was a photo beneath the words. The baby in a wicker bassinet, eyes wide open. And for a second, just a second, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The name. The explanation. The glossy finality of it all. I folded the card, placed it in a drawer, and turned off every light in the apartment. Sat in the dark until my eyes adjusted. The name was everywhere now. People called her that. Doctors, friends, strangers on social media. I saw it in hashtags, on a custom swaddle blanket in one of Caroline's Instagram reels, etched into a wooden nursery sign that said Hannah's room in delicate cursive. Each time a small piece of me shrank back. Not because I wanted it back, but because it no longer felt mine. I went back to Talia the next day. Sat in the therapist's chair like I'd been dropped from a great height and forgotten how to speak. "I feel like I'm watching someone else live my name," I finally said. Talia nodded. "Do you feel erased or duplicated?" "Neither," I whispered. "I feel like the name is now a room I don't belong in." She leaned forward slightly. "And what would it take for that room to feel yours again?" I didn't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe the name didn't belong to me anymore. A week later, I visited my favorite cafe. The one on 32nd with the soft jazz and mismatched ceramic mugs. I sat by the window and opened my sketchpad, unsure what would come out. And without thinking, I wrote 2 names in the upper right corner. Hannah Morrell. Hannah Elise Rowlands. The same name. Split by 2 lives. I stared at the names for a long time. Then slowly I began a sketch. Two figures. One older, hair tucked into a messy bun, posture tight. One small, soft curls, face tilted up in wonder. They stood at opposite sides of a window, not separated, not quite touching, but connected. A thread of pencil between their hands. I didn't label them. I didn't need to. That night Caroline texted. She smiled today, not a gas smile, a real one, eyes crinkled just like yours do. I stared at the message. Not angry, not amused. Just still. I typed a reply. I'm glad she's healthy. She didn't respond, she didn't have to. For the first time in months, there was no weight behind my name when I typed it. No ache, no resentment. Just acknowledgement. The name wasn't just mine now. And that was okay. I closed my sketchbed. Outside, it had started to rain again. The gentle Portland kind, the kind that doesn't demand shelter, just patience. I made tea, sat at the window. And for the first time, the name in the room didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like an echo. Soft. Survivable. Mine. And hers. The trust document. The envelope was thick, legal weight paper. Stamped with the return address of a firm I didn't recognize. Phelps, Dorian and Rothschild LLP. I almost tossed it aside. I wasn't expecting anything legal. I'd filed my taxes, paid my rent, fought no battles, at least none involving attorneys. But then I saw the sender's name. Caroline Rowlands. The letters looked stiff, like she'd written them with her jaw clenched. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I opened it. Inside was a packet of legal documents, 20, maybe 30 pages thick, and a small handwritten note, paperclip to the front. Her handwriting had changed, or maybe I was seeing it differently now. It used to look whimsical, now it looked restrained. The note read, Hannah, I know this doesn't undo anything, it doesn't make us square, but I heard you, every word you said in silence and otherwise. This trust is for her. The full amount, $260,000, has been transferred into a secured account under her name. She won't have access until she's 21, but it's hers, just like it should have been yours. She will know where it came from, she will know the cost. You don't owe me anything, I just needed you to know I am not rewriting what happened. I am marking it, permanently. My hands were shaking as I turned to the documents. It was real. A formal trust. A new account number. Caroline listed as grantor, Hannah Elise Rowlands as beneficiary. I skimmed the terms. Legal jargon bled into each line, but the meaning was clear, the money was there. Every cent she took from me restored in full, not to me, to the baby. I kept flipping until I landed on one paragraph that stilled me. Beneficiary Disclosure Clause. At age 18, the beneficiary will receive a written letter signed and certified from the grantor, detailing the full story behind the trust, including the financial origin and the family context of its creation. I exhaled sharp, loud in the silence of my apartment. She was going to tell her. Caroline had chosen to tell her the truth. Not the romanticized version. Not the auntie helped us make a miracle tale. The real one. I closed the folder, set it down, and wept. Not because I forgave her, but because I finally believed I didn't need to keep carrying the truth alone. One day, the girl with my name would read that letter. She would know what was taken, what was given, what was complicated, and I wouldn't have to explain it. I wouldn't have to defend my pain. I want to see Talia the next day. I handed her the packet. She didn't read it, just placed it on the table between us. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly, strange, grateful, relieved, but also like. I paused. Like I'm still the ghost in her story, only now I'm the benevolent one. Talia tilted her head. Would it help to change that narrative? To what? She smiled softly. To someone real, not a ghost, not a saint, just a woman who endured, who stayed, who witnessed. I nodded. Yes. That was better. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I took the original copy of the ultrasound photo, the one Caroline sent in that text that broke me, and I printed it. I mounted it to a blank sketchbook page. Around it I began to draw. Not the baby. Not Caroline. Just threads, lines, roots, pieces of names overlapping, separating. And then I wrote in the lower right corner. Not owed, not forgotten, not erased. The next day I bought a small fireproof safe, placed the trust documents, my sketches, the ultrasound drawing, and the USB voice notes inside. Then I labeled it. For her someday. Not for revenge. Not for vindication. For truth. Because that's what names deserve. Especially shared ones. That night I dreamed of her. Not Caroline. The baby. She was older, maybe 5, maybe 6. She stood at the edge of a field, the sun low behind her, casting 2 shadows, one hers, one mine. She turned toward me, hand outstretched. I took it. And in the dream, for the first time, I said, "Hi, I'm Hannah." And she smiled. The first birthday. A year passed. Like fog lifting slowly. Like something you forget you were waiting for. The world didn't pause for my story. Bobbies were born, people got married, clients emailed with deadlines and awkward emoji sign-offs. Life moved forward. So did I, sort of. I started teaching 2 classes a week at a local design college. I published a small collection of anatomical sketches layered with poetry, nothing flashy, just self-funded and hand-bound. A gallery downtown carried it for 2 months. It sold out. I started sleeping again. Not always peacefully, but steadily. And then one Monday morning, the envelope arrived. Smaller this time, pale pink, hand-addressed in soft cursive. You're invited to celebrate Hannah Elise's first birthday. My chest tightened. Not from surprise, but from the gentle, cruel kindness of it. No fancy venue, no RSVP card, just a note written in Caroline's voice. No party, no crowd, just cake, just music. We'd love to have you. If you're ready. She didn't say you're wanted. She said you're welcome. That difference mattered. I almost didn't go. I stood in my apartment holding the invitation for hours, my coat half on, like I was preparing to run or hide or both. But in the end I went. Not for Caroline. Not for closure. For her. Layla answered the door again, same nervous smile, same half hug. Caroline stood in the living room in jeans and a soft gray sweater. She looked tired, older somehow, the way motherhood reshapes you even when you don't notice. Dan, her husband, sat on the floor making towers out of wooden blocks. And there she was, the baby, now a full toddler, in a yellow romper with ruffled shoulders, wobbling unsteadily toward a cupcake on the coffee table. When she saw me, she stopped, looked up. Then she smiled. Wide toothy hole. "Anha," she squealed. It caught me off guard, the clarity of it, the joy. I crouched. "You remember me." She laughed, nodded, and barreled forward like a tiny comet, arms out, crashing into my legs with a grunt and a giggle. I froze, then wrapped my arms around her. Her body was warm, her hair smelled like peaches and baby shampoo. She rested her head on my shoulder like she knew, somehow, that this moment was bigger than she could understand. Behind me, Caroline said nothing. She didn't need to. There was no party, no camera crew, just 4 people and a cake. Caroline lit a single candle, we sang. Hannah clapped her hands, smearing frosting into her curls. And for the first time I laughed, genuinely. I laughed. Dan took a photo, a quiet one, no flash, just me holding her, both of us mid-laugh, my hand cradling her back like it had always known her shape. Later, when the frosting was cleaned up and the baby had begun nodding off in Caroline's lap, I sat near the window with my tea, watching the light shift across the hardwood floor. Caroline joined me. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't." She nodded. "I still think about it every day," she said. "What I did, what it cost you." I sipped my tea, didn't answer. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." "Good," I said, "because I still don't have it." She nodded again, quiet. "But I'm here," I added. She looked at me, her eyes glistened. "Yes," she said, "you're here." Before I left, I handed her a wrapped package. Small, heavy. Inside was a book, hand-bound, 1 copy, no barcode, no title on the spine. She looked at it confused, then flipped it open. Inside, I had pasted sketches from the last year, not of anatomy, not of clients. Of her, the baby. Moments I had imagined, ones I'd witnessed. A series of silent drawings, each dated, each signed with my initials, no names, just expressions, hands, profiles. On the final page I wrote, "For the girl who shares my name. May you grow into it fully, fiercely, kindly. And may it never weigh more than you can carry." Caroline looked up. She didn't cry, but she mouthed thank you. I nodded once, then turned and left. Back home I sat at my desk, pulled out a clean page from my sketchbook, and wrote, "She turned one today, and so did I." 1 year into knowing her. 1 year into becoming someone new. I signed it, dated it, and placed it inside the wooden box. The one labeled, "For her someday." The conversation she'll never hear. It started as a whisper to myself. A murmur into the air, like speaking into fog. But one night I opened the voice memo app on my phone, pressed record, and said, "If you're listening to this, it means you're old enough to wonder." I was sitting at my kitchen table, tea gone cold beside me, the apartment silent but alive with the hum of memory. Rain tapped at the windows, steady, unbothered, like a metronome for my thoughts. Maybe someone told you, maybe you found the letter in the trust folder, maybe you asked and they didn't know how to answer. So I'll tell you. I looked at my own reflection in the window, not crying, not trembling, just open finally. You were named after me. Not because I agreed. Not because I gave something. But because something was taken. And then something else was born. I paused. The room felt too still. I clicked off the recording, saved it. Voice memo 1 for her. The next day I recorded another. And another. Not dramatic ones, not angry. Fragments of truth. The pieces I'd never say out loud to Caroline, to Dan, to anyone in the room when the cake was cut and the camera flashed. Only to her. The girl with my name. One night I recorded this. I wanted to hate you for existing with the name I worked so hard to make my own. But then I held you, and you were so light. So soft. So new. And I realized you didn't steal anything. You just arrived. I don't know if we'll ever be close. If you'll ever call me aunt. But I want you to know. You were never the wound. You were the scar tissue, the healing. Another. I lost my father before I ever lost my sister. But losing her that day, the day she named you, felt sharper. Like grief inside betrayal. But somehow, watching you grow has taught me the strangest kind of forgiveness. Not for her. For me. I recorded a dozen more over the months that followed. I saved each one to a USB drive and tucked it inside the wooden box, the same one that held the trust copy, the drawings, the letter I never sent. I labeled the drive. Her story in my voice. Then on a Tuesday in March, I recorded the final one. My voice was calm, quiet, steady. By the time you hear this, you'll probably have heard a version of what happened. Maybe your mother told you, maybe you pieced it together, maybe you resented her, maybe you resented me. Maybe you wondered why your name made people tense. I can't control that. But here's what I can tell you. You're not a symbol. You're not a debt. You are a beginning. I didn't choose your name, but I choose this to tell you the truth so that when you grow into that name, you do it fully. Fiercely. Kindly. That's the only legacy I want to leave you with. I clicked stop. Saved it. Backed it up. That night I dreamed of her, older now. 12, maybe 13, her hair longer, her voice sharper. She was sitting at my kitchen table across from me, holding a mug of tea she probably didn't want. She asked, "Why didn't you stop her?" I answered, "Because I thought my silence was safer." She nodded once, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a drawing. A sketch, not mine, of two women, one older, one younger, standing in a field of names, but only one was circled. Hannah. And in the dream I smiled. Because she knew. Not just what happened, but who I was. When I woke up, I walked to the closet, opened the wooden box, and added one final note. If you're reading this, then you're ready. You can ask me anything. I won't lie. I won't flinch. This name is ours now. Then I closed the lid. Not with grief. With peace. The legacy question. It started with a headline. I was in my pajamas, hair still damp from the shower, oatmeal cooling on the counter. I opened my email and there it was, bolded, glowing. Medical illustrator Hannah Morrell selected for National Museum feature. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I laughed, not out loud, but in my chest. One of those stunned, silent laughs that means everything and nothing all at once. I clicked the link. The email came from a curator at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. They were curating an exhibit on the intersection of art and anatomy, and my work, specifically the visceral lineage series I created during the months after Caroline's betrayal, had been selected. We believe your pieces uniquely capture the humanity beneath biology, the curator wrote. Your work tells a story. I stared at the screen. And then I cried. Because the story they were choosing to tell was mine. Not Caroline's. Not the baby's. Mine. Later that week, the museum called to finalize the details. There'll be an exhibit book, the woman said. We'd love to include a short artist's statement, something about your relationship to your name, your legacy. There was that word again. Legacy. I hung up the phone and sat in the quiet. And suddenly, I was back in the hospital. Holding her. Hearing the name spoken like a new melody. Watching it slip from being only mine into something shared. I opened my laptop, typed, deleted, typed again. Everything sounded too neat, too rehearsed, too scared. Eventually, I just wrote. My name has always been a place of tension. A borderland between what I built and what I almost lost. It was taken, then returned, then rewritten. And now it exists in two bodies. One who grew it. One who inherited it. I no longer carry it alone. And maybe that's the legacy. I hit send before I could change my mind. Caroline texted the next day. I saw the press release. She'll be so proud of you one day. I stared at the message, then replied. I hope she'll be proud of her own name too. Caroline sent back one emoji, a heart cracked down the middle. It felt right. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at my door. Inside, a photograph. Matt unframed. The baby, now a toddler, standing in a field of sunflowers, chocolate smeared across her mouth, curls haloing her face like static. Her eyes squinted with joy. Her feet bare on the dirt. Her arms wide open. There was no caption. Just her name handwritten on the back. Hannah E. I ran my fingers across the ink. Smiled. And then, for reasons I can't explain, I flipped the photo over and wrote beneath it. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we survive with. I placed it inside the wooden box. The same one I swore I'd only open again when she was old enough to ask. And then I sat at my desk, opened my sketchpad, and drew her for the first time, smiling. Not asleep. Not delicate. Laughing. Free. The question she asked first. She was 5 when it happened. I wasn't expecting it, not yet. I thought I had years. I thought the questions would come with puberty, with deeper awareness, with the awkwardness of family trees and late-night whispers. But no. They came in the kitchen on a Saturday morning while I was peeling apples for pie and she sat on the counter swinging her legs. She was wearing a red hoodie with glitter stars and sipping orange juice through a bendy straw. We were alone. Caroline had stepped out to pick up more sugar. Her voice was small. Not hesitant, just curious. Why do I have your names? I didn't freeze. Didn't drop the knife. But I felt it, that tiny crack of breath behind my ribs. I turned slowly, met her eyes. They were green today like moss. I dried my hands on a towel and said, That's a very good question. She tilted her head. Is it because you're my favorite aunt? I smiled. I don't think I was your favorite when you were born. Why? I sat beside her on a stool, lowering myself to her height. Because when your mommy picked your name, I said gently, she didn't ask me first. Her brows furrowed. But it's your name. Yes, it is. Her legs stopped swinging. Were you mad? I looked at her, really looked. Her freckles, her curls, her little fingers stained with juice. And I told her the truth. Yes, I said, I was very mad and very sad. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Mommy says sometimes people do the wrong thing because they think it's the right thing in their heart. I smiled. That sounds like something your mommy would say. She leaned in conspiratorially. Do you still hate her? No, I said, I don't hate her, but it took me a long time to feel that. She thought about that. Then she touched my hand. I like having your name, she said. It makes me feel strong. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm glad it does. Did you ever want to change yours? I paused, looked out the window. The morning light fell across the floor like ribbons. No, I said slowly, but I had to learn how to share it. She scrunched her nose, sharing hard. Yeah, I whispered, it really is. Later that day, after she'd gone outside to draw chalk suns on the driveway, Caroline came into the kitchen. She asked, she said quietly. I nodded. Caroline closed her eyes. I didn't think she'd remember the connection so young. She didn't remember, she noticed. We stood in silence. Then Caroline said something I'd never heard from her before. Thank you for not giving her a lie. I looked at her. No more lies, I said, ever. She nodded. That night I added a new sketch to the box. 2 girls, one older, one younger, sitting side by side on stools, peeling apples, halos of light around them. Their faces mirrored but distinct. At the bottom I wrote, she asked first, and I told her everything she was ready to hold. The moment I felt like an ant. It was a Thursday night in October when she called me. Not Caroline. Her. The little girl with my name. Only she wasn't so little anymore. Hi, Aunt Hannah, she said, her voice clear and confident over the line. I could hear her breathing like she was walking quickly through a hallway. School, maybe, the echo suggested lockers. Hey kiddo, I said, everything okay? Yeah, she said, I have this project. For history, we have to write about someone in our family we look up to. It's due Monday. Sounds important. It is, and I picked you. I froze. I wasn't prepared for that. I managed to say. Yeah, I asked Mom if it was okay. She said it was up to me, so I thought you're the only one in the family who's, like, actually in a museum. I laughed, breath-catching. That's fair. She rushed on, her words picking up speed. I wanted to write about how you helped people with art and how your drawings showed feelings. Mom said you started drawing again after I was born. Is that true? I closed my eyes. Yes, I said, that's true. She was quiet for a second. Then was it because of me? There it was again. The question that always came dressed in 2 big shoes, trying to walk gently but hitting every raw place in me anyway. Yes, I said, my voice steady, because of you, but not in the way you might think. She waited, patient, not demanding, just open. You reminded me that I could still create something honest, I said, even if it came from pain. She didn't say anything, but I could hear her breathing, listening. Then that's what I'm going to write. I smiled, you're a good writer. She laughed, you haven't read it yet. I don't have to. That weekend she came over. Not with Caroline, alone. She sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, fingers flying. When she was done, she asked if I'd read it. I did. The essay was titled, The Other Hannah. In it she wrote, most people think being named after someone means you're trying to be like them. But I think it means you get to carry part of their story until you're ready to write your own. My Aunt Hannah didn't give me my name. But she gave me everything I needed to understand it. I wiped tears from my cheeks by the second paragraph. By the end, I was laughing and crying at the same time. She looked at me, suddenly unsure. Is it okay? It's more than okay, I said. It's beautiful. She stood up, awkward, 13-year-old limbs unsure where to go. I pulled her into a hug. And she let me. Not stiffly, not out of obligation. But the way someone hugs you when they know your arms will hold. I love you, I whispered. She squeezed tighter. I know I love you too. That night I sat alone and reopened the wooden box. I added the printed essay. Labeled it. The first time she wrote me back. Then I turned off the lights, sat on the couch and let myself feel it fully, deeply, quietly. For the first time in her life, I felt like her aunt. Not her shadow. Not her story. Just her person. The day she said it was her name now. She was 17 the last time we talked about the name. Not subtly, not through sketches or memories or crumbs left in silence. Directly. She was taller than me now. Same curls, same eyes, but her voice had found its edge, soft but shaped, like she'd spent years learning how to use it without apology. We were walking along the riverfront, late afternoon sun slanting across the water. Her senior portraits had just wrapped, and we were celebrating with ice cream cones and loose, meandering conversation. I got into Oberlin, she said, eyes squinting into the light. I stopped walking. What? Early admission, full ride. I pulled her into a hug before I could think, ice cream pressing cold into my sleeve. She laughed, sticky. I don't care, I said, I'm so damn proud of you. She smiled, licking the cone. I want a major in creative writing, maybe minor in bioethics. That's a hell of a combination. She shrugged. I've had complicated women in my life. That made me laugh. And then, as we kept walking, she said it softly, like she'd been holding it for a while. Do you still think of it as yours? I didn't pretend to misunderstand. I looked out over the water, let the air fill with gulls and distant music before answering. No, I said, not anymore. She was quiet for a moment. Then I do. I turned. She wasn't smiling. I think of it as mine, she said firmly now, not because I claimed it, not because Mom gave it to me, but because I grew into it. I nodded slowly, emotions catching in the back of my throat. You earned it, I said. She nodded, but I didn't do it alone. That silence between us, weightless and heavy at once, said everything words couldn't. Later that night when I got home, I opened the wooden box one final time. The box was almost full now. Sketches, voice notes, the ultrasound, the trust documents, the sunflower photo, her first birthday candle, her essay. And now this moment. I sat at my desk, pulled out one last blank page and wrote. She said it's her name now. And for the first time, I believe that's the truth. Not a theft. Not a wound. A legacy. One we both survived. Then I added a small envelope to the top of the box. Inside it, a short letter written by hand. To be opened by Hannah Morrell whenever she is ready. I sealed it. Labeled the box. No longer for her, now with her. And closed it for good. 3 months later, I stood at her graduation, her cap decorated with a quote from her favorite poet, Worcestershire. I belong deeply to myself. I clapped until my palms stung. Cried until my throat ached. Watched her walk across that stage with her name announced into the microphone like a thunderclap of arrival. Hannah Morrell. And I didn't flinch. I stood taller. Because it was hers now. Because I had let it go. And because somewhere in that letting go, I became whole again.